Hello students, and welcome to yet another in a series of video lectures. Today we're going to spend some time talking about culturally competent social work practice. It's a very important thing to recognize and to understand as you move into your career as social workers, the importance of cultural diversity, and cultural competency in the work that you actually do. So with that, let's get started. Culturally competent social work practice. Now, this particular definition of cultural competence comes from a 2001 edition of the Cultural Competence Guide for the NASW. And the definition is as follows. As you can see here, cultural competence is a huge priority and a very large task in that it requires you as social workers to recognize and take into consideration all the things that are listed here as you're doing your work in the field with families from a diverse, ethnically diverse background. The NASW cultural competence standards, and there are 10 of them, actually have some requirements for you as well in terms of things that you're expected to do in your work with clients, as well as your dedication to continue to learn about the importance of cultural diversity. And so, as we just walk through them, ethics and values means that the code wants you to recognize your personal and professional values that may conflict or accommodate your diverse client groups that you're working with. Self-awareness, understanding your own personal cultural values and beliefs. Culturally, cross-cultural knowledge, and developing knowledge to understand the history, tradition, and values of different family systems. Cross-cultural skills, the ability to use the appropriate methods and understand the roles that culture plays inside of the populations that you are working with. Service delivery, making sure that you have ample knowledge of what's available in your community to your clients from diverse backgrounds, and making sure that you can make referrals that are appropriate. Empowerment and advocacy, making sure that you understand how various policies or various forms of social policy actually impact the clients that you are working with from those diverse populations. For example, if we think about immigration law and some of the clients that you might find yourself working with, that there are policies that are in place in different parts of the country, and sometimes we're here in our own state, that may not have the best interest or best outcomes for the clients that we're working with. Subverting a diverse workforce, being in part of being supportive of recruiting a diverse workforce that is reflective of the clients that they actually serve. Ongoing professional education, training to learn about new communities, to learn about different things that are happening inside of those communities. Language diversity, making sure that there are services that are available in people's first language, or having the ability to have interpreters, as well as cross-cultural leadership, and that's the ability as a professional social worker to communicate various information and inform the rest of the professional world about the diverse client groups that we work with. So these are the standards that have been put in place for the by the NASW for us as social workers as we move forth on this journey. As we look at diversity in the United States, you can see that things are changing and have changed quite drastically. There are 300 million of us now who reside here in these United States, and by 2050, not a very long time from now, about half of the U.S. population will come from the 4 traditional people of color groups that we've listed here. So again, it's to our advantage as a society for the social welfare of our being, as well as for our financial and economic well-being, to look at ways that we can make sure that ethnicity, role, race, and all of those particular things are taken into account as we provide services for our clientele. We also need to look at the number of folks with disabilities, and there are about 41 million people at last count that suffer from some form of disability, and there are a few here that are listed, but there are many others. and making sure that when we are working with those clientels that we're working in respectful ways based on what's happening for them, what their needs are, empowering them for self-determination, and to work uh, within the confines of their particular disabilities and to treat them with the dignity and respect that they deserve. So these are all things that we have to look at as social workers as you're moving forward in this work. Some other things that the research has also shared and shown us is that there are some cross-cultural differences. And so when we look at communities of colors as groups, you'll see that there is high family orientation, high respect for elders, and they have a flexible approach to time, and they're highly spiritual. So what this means is that most communities of color have the we mentality, and so they make decisions based on often what's going to be in the best interest of the family as opposed to the individual. There's a high regard for elders. They have a place in the hierarchy. Um, the timepieces are flexible, and they also have a variety of spiritual beliefs that are often are a source of strength for them. In our Anglo communities, we actually see that there are some sharp differences in terms of there's a high individual orientation. So Anglo folks, by and large, tend to look at the need of the individual as opposed to the family. Um, there's lower respect for elders, and their approach to time is fairly rigid. 8 o'clock is 8 o'clock, and there's lower levels of spirituality. And this isn't to suggest that folks from the Anglo community um, do things in a way that's much more damaging to folks that they encounter, but it's just a difference that's based on that particular culture. So as an Anglo social worker, it's important for you to understand the context when working with communities of color. And then as social workers of color working with Anglo families, it's important for you to understand those nuances because, the failure to understand that could actually lead to many problems in terms of the ongoing work that you need. But just interesting information to know. As it relates to the generalist model, when you are looking at engagement planning, intervention, the evaluation, and the eventual termination of services, that know that it will more than likely look very different depending on the diverse population that you're working with. And these are things that you will need to consider that are different from particular group to group. And things like the value of time, communication patterns, the various roles of parents, family experiences, family centering, sexual orientation, the nature of disability. All of these are things that you must take into account and adjust your intervention and your methodology to accommodate what those particular families needs, or you're not going to be able to get very far in terms of the work that you will be doing with them. These are some of the barriers for social workers, some ways of thinking that don't tend to necessarily enhance the importance of cultural competence with the families that we work with. So recognize these and recognize that if these are things that are operating for you or for agencies that you work with, then there's some more work that needs to be done as it relates to culturally competent social work practice. Some things that you can do to really help on this particular journey, and it's lifelong learning when you're in the social work field, is to really start to look at some of your own assumptions as it relates to self-disclosure. Have you been a part of a community or a culture where you just don't talk about yourself, or you don't talk about various aspects of yourself, and how does that play out in the client relationship? Assumptions about family values, nonverbal behaviors, whether people are looking at you when they're talking to you or not. It all varies and it's different depending on which culture you happen to be working with. Trusting relationships and even assumptions around directness and assertiveness may be looked at differently depending on the communities that you're working with. So finally, wanting you to also recognize that you have a responsibility to become more culturally competent. And one of the ways that you can do that is to start to really learn and understand about your own cultural identity, your own ethnicity, and your own beliefs. And it becomes a path before you can actually start to then look at how you can start to expand and do those kinds of activities with the other groups that you may be working with. So this is bringing us to a close as it relates to our video lecture series. As always, please prepare yourself before you come to class by watching the videos and making sure that they supplement your readings, and so that you'll be ready to move forward when we engage in our in-class activities. Thank you, and I will see you in class.